IT risk management plays a core part within GRC and is a crucial pillar within risk. It helps safeguard a business's assets, its reputation, finances, and allows for business continuity. In today's business landscape, risk can emerge from anywhere, from operational failures to financial instability and cyber threats, as well as compliance and regulatory standards. In today's video, I'm going to help explain IT risk management, what it is, why it's important, and how to effectively apply it in your business. Let's get started. We'll begin asking, what is risk management? What is IT risk management? Well, IT risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks for organizations. And in doing so, it allows for organizations to identify those risks and reduce them to an appropriate level where organizations can operate safely. Risks come in many forms, and typically the main forms that comes in is operational risks, which affects the day-to-day for business operations. In the event that a risk were to come to fruition, it would disrupt the business either highly, minimally, or moderately, depending on what the risk is. Then you have financial risks, which come from, let's say, non-compliance or a failure of software, hardware, or the destruction of data or whatever it may be. But what ultimately it does, it causes financial loss. The next type of risk that you do have is IT cybersecurity risk, which is definitely the most prominent, where you will have ransomware attacks or malware attacks, DDoS attacks, any type of attack that is cyber related. And in these events, this can contribute to financial loss or operational loss, depending on what the type of attack is. And this is definitely the most prominent. Then you have compliance risk, which is generally issues to not following or staying in compliant with either industry standards or law. And so there are several steps within IT risk management and risk management in general that we have to approach, as it is a cycle. And the first approach to it is identifying the risk. Once you identify the risk, you then assess the risk, and after you assess the risk, you then mitigate. The first step in IT risk management is identifying the risks. This is generally a very proactive approach where you identify the risks that are going to be a threat to your organization, that is going to halt business continuity. And this is in the proactive approach, this is done in various ways through risk assessments, audits, employee interviews, and general intelligence gathering. Another part to identifying the risks is using and utilizing these different types of tools. There are several different types of tools that you can utilize. For example, like SWOT analysis or a risk register. SWOT analysis, for example, is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Typically what this does is it allows for you to identify those areas within your organization, within whatever you want to do, those risks, and it will help reduce the likelihood of risks occurring. And with a risk register as well, it also accumulates the different types of risks. Basically, it is a repository of your risks. But the overall key to identifying risks is to be systematic when you come to identifying your risks, because you want to then assess those risks, collect all of the risks that you've identified, and then assess them accordingly. Next, after you identify your risks, you want to assess them. And so there are different types of ways to assess your risks, but generally there are two main camps of using quantitative data or qualitative data. But generally it's just those two camps, with subcategories of semi-quantitative or semi-qualitative. In assessing those risks, you want to find the likelihood or the impact of that risk. Once you have found the potential likelihood and impact of that risk, you then want to give it an assessment score of most impactful to least impactful. When you do that, you then rank the scores of your risks from the most impactful, the least impactful, and put that into your risk register, because you have then identified and assessed your risks. While conducting a risk assessment, there are key factors you do want to keep in mind, like your organization's risk tolerance and risk appetite, how much that your overall organization can take on in terms of risk. After identifying your risks and assessing them, you then want to approach a strategy into mitigating those risks. And generally, there's a couple of ways to approach risk. There is either mitigation, there is avoidance, there's acceptance, or there's transference of the risks. Starting with mitigate, it's pretty straightforward. Once you've identified and assessed the risk, and you chose to actually address that risk, you want to then implement a control. And that's what mitigation is. You're implementing a control to reduce the likelihood of that risk occurring, or if it does occur, it lessens the impact. Next up is acceptance. You can accept the risk if you choose to. So once you identified that risk and acknowledged it, you can accept the risk and say, you know what, we know that the risk is there, but we're going to accept it and do nothing about it anyways. And we'll proceed forward with whatever it is that we're going to do. But either way, you cannot accept a risk without performing a risk assessment. You don't know what you don't know. So you can't just accept a risk randomly and just move forward blindly. In order to accept any risk, you must conduct a risk assessment and know the risk. And so the last two are transferring the risk or avoiding the risk entirely. Starting with transfer, what that typically means is that you want to transfer the risks. For example, getting insurance. So in the event of a data breach, you do have insurance and you can make claims and you'll be covered that way. But don't get it confused. Transfer does not mean transfer of responsibility. You do have responsibility at the end of the day to your clients and to your stakeholders. You can't just transfer the responsibility with the risk and say it's out of our hands now. That's not how it works. But in certain cases, it is a good idea to get insurance still, but just keep that in mind. And with risk avoidance, what risk avoidance is saying that, hey, look, whatever it is that we're going to go do, this is too high of a risk, and we're just going to avoid it completely by not doing it. That is an option as well. Given if what it is, what the risk is. So when it comes to risk mitigation, the main point of it is that you have to lay out your clear objectives and what you want to do after that you've identified and assessed your risk. Whether it's one of those things that I have just laid out, you have to approach it in that way. Lastly, you have ongoing continuous monitoring. So after you have identified and you have assessed and mitigated your risks, you then have continuous monitoring, which what that means is that it's an ongoing process. You continuously look at your risks because risks continuously evolve every day. And so you want to keep up to date by using GRC tools, automating tools, and continuous audits as well for continuous improvement and effectiveness of your controls that you've put in place. But having an effective IT risk management program goes beyond everything I just listed today. It's about building a culture within your organization, a culture of awareness, of risk awareness, and being holistically aware of all the risks that could occur and to approach it with confidence and an understanding of what risk is. Another important part of building out an IT risk management program is finding a good framework, whether it's the NIST CSF, ISO, whatever it may be. It's implementing a good framework. And so stay tuned for our next topic, where we'll be discussing third-party IT risk management and vendor selection, whereby selecting the right vendors for you and what it takes, and making sure that the vendors align with your IT risk security and its standards. As always, coffee up, and I'll see you in the next video.
To be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my lonely